Hi guys, welcome back to Shine the Fine Art. Today we are, or rather I am, you can see, working on painting roses and drawing roses and I'm gonna do it in 4 different mediums. I am starting off with a watercolor rose, and then I'm going to do an oil pastel rose, followed by a graphite, and finally a rose with oil paint. The reason I'm doing these is because today's vlog is all about talking about working on different mediums, the pros and cons. And while I talk about it, I thought it would be kind of boring to, just talk about it and not have anything visual. So I thought of doing the same subject in different mediums, and that's what you can see right now. So I've been practicing art for years now. When I started off painting, drawing as a child, I started off obviously with pencil and graphite drawings, and after that I did a lot of watercolors, mainly because probably watercolor is always so much more available, and also it is much more inexpensive than the other mediums that I was later exposed to. As a child, I was also worked a lot in oil pastels. Then when I was a teenager, say about 15 or 16, then I first got to play with some oil paints. Since then, oil paints has been my first love. However, that did not confine me to working with oil paints only. Now, currently, I work in oils as well as acrylics, watercolors, graphite, and I sometimes add in a little bit of ink as well. But most of my ink works are combined with watercolors. So, predominantly, I'm working with oils, acrylics, watercolor, and graphite. And sometimes I am also working on oil pastels. So I have read and heard a lot about not working with so many mediums. You would see that most of the accomplished artists would actually say not to work on very many different mediums. So let me share my knowledge and thoughts on this matter. Since it is more popular view that you should not be working in too many mediums, let me start with the cons. So the first problem that could occur is that when you are trying too many mediums, you are practicing different mediums at different times, so you're becoming a jack of all trades, but you are not really mastering any of those skills, or rather any of those mediums. That is obviously the first thing that comes to my mind, as that could be a problem in working with very many different mediums. Each medium has its own styles, techniques to excel in, and each of them calls for time to practice to excel in them. And always remember that we have to give enough time to each and every medium to practice, to understand, and to grasp it very well. The second thing is kind of like a brand and style issue that you would more generally hear about most artists talking about. Excuse me. So any artist in the long run develops their individual style and subject matters or mediums of choice. Sometimes when you're working with very many different mediums, it can come into the way of developing a particular style or brand image just because different mediums work differently. For example, say if you more often work, say, in impressionistic style, so acrylics and oils, yes, they would probably act very much similar. However, watercolor can be a little bit hindrance here and there, just a thought. So again, if you're a portrait artist, it is more important to your style, however, and not whether the portrait is done in watercolor or oil paints. So if you're a portrait artist, nobody is going to question your style, whether you have done a portrait in graphite or in oil paints or in any other medium. You are a portrait artist anyways. So although yes, there can be a style and branding issue, but you can always work your way through it. So if you have to create a body of work in each medium so that your clients, if they are more interested in a certain medium, say oil paints, then watercolor can turn them away. So you have to create a body of work in each medium. That again leads into our next issue, which is time. The very first issue I mentioned, that there is a time problem working with different brands. So because you have to master the skills and techniques of each of the mediums. So if you're working in very many different mediums, obviously you have to work so much more, put so much more time in working with different mediums so that you excel in each of them. And again, to create a body of work to present in front of your clients or your critiques, so that they are constantly viewing your work, you are in their mind, that is also time consuming. And the very last problem that I can see working in very many different mediums, although it is not at all an unimportant problem, is expense. Art materials are not inexpensive. In fact, artist quality art materials are very, very expensive. So if you're working in 4 different mediums, that means your expenditure is 4 times as much as if you're only working in one medium. So you have to consider that fact as well. Now that I've talked so much negative about working in medium, let me jump into the positivities, which actually is my thought, because I personally prefer working in very many different mediums. So let's start with what I think is the best advantage in working in different mediums. You have a wonderful array of variety, and who doesn't know that variety is the spice of life? And you're trying always different things and keeping it active and different, and that kind of helps you keeping active, working, learning, motivated, and everything else, which I'll explain in much more details in a little bit. Secondly, I think working in different mediums is a no-fail recipe to cure art blocks. Many artists often face this issue of art blocks, certain periods of time where they have tremendous problem just to produce any sort of art. They don't feel motivated, they don't feel like doing art, they don't feel like picking up the brush and painting, or even sometimes it's just a problem with starting or finishing paintings. If you're working in different mediums, I can guarantee you that 9 out of 10 times working in a different medium will cure your artwork. Like say, for some reason, if you're working constantly with oil paints, at a certain point of time you can burn out, because oil paintings consume a lot of time. It's a lot of effort, and more than the time that you're painting on it, you have to allow trying for different layers to dry in between, and that can be sometimes painstaking. That can sometimes steer you away from creating more art. So what I generally do is, when I am doing a lot of oil paintings, I do smaller pieces of watercolors or graphite or oil pastels in between to keep everything rotating, so that I am creating a lot of art, as well as I am not getting bored or not feeling stuck and not feeling the art block kind of thing. Thirdly, better use of time. You have to learn how to manage your time. If you are saying that time is the issue, that's why you cannot learn different medium, time is the issue, so you cannot create a body of work, you have to manage time. As an artist, it's sometimes people think that it is a fun thing to do. Yes, it is a fun thing to do, to be an artist. However, it involves a lot of hard work. You will have to be very careful of how you manage your time, how much time you put in different activities within and outside your art creating process. So if you handle your time well, you can do it. You can work in different mediums, you can create body of work in different mediums by keeping it rotating, and you can practice enough in each medium to master each of them. Fourthly, when you are working in different mediums, you're learning the best out of all the different worlds. So obviously, you learn how watercolors are different from oil paints, or how graphite is different from oil pastel, how you have to go from light to dark if you're working in graphite or watercolor, and almost the reverse is true for oil painting or color pencils or pastels. So you learn so many different things in different mediums, and you can always use this to your advantage. You can mix the mediums and create striking new pieces of art that probably people have never thought of before. Like mixing inks and watercolors is something that I can give you an example about what I often do. Or to reduce the creating time of oil paintings, I often do an underpainting in acrylics. So there I'm mixing acrylics and oil paints. So a lot of people create backgrounds in watercolor for their color pencil works. So there you see, you can use the knowledge of different mediums to your advantage here. And last but not the least is motivation, which is kind of related to what I was talking about when I was talking about art block. To every person needs to feel motivated to do anything, and art, obviously being a creative thing, you need more motivation. Sometimes when you're not feeling like doing one thing in art, you can do the other thing, or try the same thing in a different medium, and you probably would be interested and motivated to do that. It keeps you on your toes, learning new things all the times, and facing new challenges with each different medium. So that often gives more motivation than working in one single medium. Finally, to conclude today's vlog, I would like to say that to each their own is the last thing I want to say. Whether you choose to work in one medium or two or multiple, it is your personal choice. What you want to do is finally, as an artist, your choice. As long as you are aware of the issues that can come up working with different mediums or working in the same medium, and you can keep them in control, you are the master of your choices. So go away and paint away, draw away in whichever medium or whichever numbers of medium that you want to, and all the best to you. And once again, I will share all my social media links in the video description so that you can keep following me and come to know what I'm currently working on and what's coming up. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for watching and listening.